Hampton Court Palace owes part of its existence to its predecessor, the former Knights Hospitallers of St John Jerusalem, who acquired the manor of Hampton in 1236 and used the site as a grange, a centre for their agricultural estates. The Hospitallers of St John later rented the grange to a royal courtier, Giles d'Aubenay, who took out a lease on the property in 1494. Around this time, the area surrounding the grange was becoming very popular with members of the royal family, particularly King Henry VII, who rebuilt the royal lodgings at Sheen as Richmond Palace. Henry and his family stayed on the d'Aubenay estate several times. They have particularly favoured d'Aubenay's country residence as a peaceful retreat away from their London homes at Westminster and the Tower of London. D'Aubenay died in 1508, and the estate's next resident was an ambitious religious cleric, Thomas Wolsey. Wolsey became firm friends with the next king, Henry VIII, and through him, Wolsey rose rapidly to become a cardinal and, later, Lord Chancellor of England. He also held many other influential posts and remained at Henry's side for over a decade. Wolsey, no doubt buoyed by his new status, turned d'Aubenay's estate into a bishop's palace fit for his elevated social position. Wolsey added new sumptuous private chambers and 3 suites for the new royal family. By the 1520s, Hampton Court was the centre of hosting many delegations from Europe, and with that, Wolsey's fall from grace was pretty close to the future. Some regarded the bishop's palace as far too grand for a cleric, and Wolsey rarely ventured from his palace to visit the king, which drew scorn and division from within the royal household. Although Wolsey's days were numbered, it was in the late 1520s that Henry was desperate to obtain a divorce from his first wife, Catherine. The reason was that she had failed to provide Henry with a male heir despite numerous pregnancies. Catherine, who was 40 in 1525, but because of her age, the object of Henry's desire was now the much younger Anne Boleyn. But after years of political manoeuvring and discussions, Catherine still refused to comply. The Pope didn't grant the divorce, and in 1528 Wolsey lost both Hampton Court and other estates to the king. Wolsey, however, was permitted to remain as Archbishop of York. He travelled to Yorkshire for the first time in his career, but at Cawood in North Yorkshire he was accused of treason and ordered to London by Henry Percy, the 6th Earl of Northumberland. In great distress, he set out for the capital with his chaplain, Edmund Bonner, later known as the murderous Bishop of London, Bloody Bonner. He fell ill on the journey and died at Leicester on the 29th of November 1530, around the age of 60 years. By the time Henry finished his building works at Hampton Court Palace in about 1540, the palace was one of the most modern, sophisticated and magnificent in England. Much of what the visitors see today was commissioned by Henry, who made Hampton Court his palace and reigned from there until he died in 1547. His 3 surviving children were 9-year-old Prince Edward and his older sisters Mary and Elizabeth. Each would rule England, and Hampton Court would continue to play an important part in the lives of the Tudor monarchs. During Elizabeth's reign, Hampton Court continued to welcome foreign delegations. It also remained a stage for court entertainments, particularly for dramatic performances and court masques. After Elizabeth died without an heir, King James VI of Scotland came south to become James I of England, who ruled from 1603 and ensured Hampton Court's continuing importance in royal life was assured. During his reign, Hampton Court became more of a royal leisure centre and served as a venue for plays, dances, banquets and court masques. Amongst the assembled guests was one William Shakespeare. He was booked as one of the newly liveried King's Men to produce his plays in front of a royal audience. Hampton Court served as both palace and prison for James's son Charles I, who ruled from 1625 to 1649. Charles built a new tennis court and also dug out the Longford River, which still brings water from 11 miles away to power the fountains of Hampton Court's formal gardens. Whilst Charles I indulged in personal luxury, he grew increasingly distant and hostile to his people, particularly those who wanted a fairer system of democracy in Parliament. Until then, Parliament had very little say in the affairs of the state, and by 1647 he was arrested by the parliamentarians. Later, in 1649, he was executed after raising a mercenary army in Scotland, which was later to be defeated by the forces of Parliament. At that point, Charles I was considered a traitor to the people of England after pleas to change his ways had failed. In short, he was a very selfish and arrogant ruler who met his end on the blade of an axe. The parliamentarians then decided to strip the royal palaces of their wealth and possessions and drew up a list of items from Hampton Court to be sold or disposed of. The Chapel Royal was an early victim, stripped of all its fine fittings. At this time, Oliver Cromwell, the parliamentarian leader, became Lord Protector and used the facilities provided at Hampton Court at weekends. By 1650, Charles's son, Charles II, was invited to return from exile to take the throne from the parliamentarians. After Charles came Queen Anne, who ruled from 1702. She used Hampton Court for her love of hunting. Anne much preferred Windsor Castle rather than Hampton Court as a royal residence. After Queen Anne's death in the year 1714, the reins of royal power were inherited by a distant cousin in Hanover, Germany, a man who was to become King George I, who ruled until 1727. George was ill-suited for English life. He could not speak English and preferred spending more time in Germany than in England, and his queen never visited England. For a short period during 1718, George I held full court at Hampton Court. Hampton Court Palace was little used for a decade after 1718, until the death of George I. However, after him came his son and daughter, King George II and Queen Caroline, who delighted in the display and magnificence of a royal court. George III decided not to live there, and there was debate about the future of the palace's thousands of rooms. In 1838, the young Queen Victoria ordered that Hampton Court Palace should be thrown open to all her subjects without restriction. That is, of course, from an admission fee today, which helps maintain the building and its fixtures. Officially, according to the Hampton Court website, the palace is haunted by the following ghosts. Catherine Howard, the screaming lady in the haunted gallery. She is believed to have visited Hampton Court's haunted gallery, where she was dragged back screaming to her rooms while under house arrest, accused of committing adultery by her husband, King Henry VIII. Sybil Penn, the Grey Lady of Hampton Court Palace. Sightings of Dame Sybil Penn, servant to 4 Tudor monarchs, began around 1829 when the church at nearby Hampton was rebuilt and her impressive tomb moved. Dame Sybil has reputedly haunted several parts of the palace, including the state apartments and clock court. Jane Seymour. The stories of Jane Seymour's ghostly apparition wandering through the palace and its cobbled courtyards, carrying a lighted taper, reflect the tragedy which befell her at the palace. Jane died at Hampton Court in 1537 following complications after the birth of Edward, Henry VIII's only son. In 2003, security staff heard alarms ringing near an exhibition hall, indicating that fire doors had been opened, but they found them closed. Mystified, they examined CCTV footage and were astonished when the cameras showed the heavy doors opening, apparently of their own volition. Suddenly, a figure wearing a long coat appeared and shut the doors. The identity of this figure, nicknamed Skeletor, became the subject of intense debate, with some even claiming it might be the ghost of one of Hampton Court's most famous former residents, Henry VIII. For me, Hampton Court Palace is one of the most visited, but less is known of its ghostly residents than some other royal palaces, and uniquely, one that has never been adequately investigated. It is seldom that anyone is lucky enough to catch a ghost, and even rarer to capture one to film, and far rarer still to have pictured more than one spirit in a single frame. Yet this happened in 2012 on a hot August weekend. The photographer Trevor Tye stood at the main public entrance, waiting 45 minutes for the area to clear of tourists before he took this shot, looking from the entrance to a galleried area above in an area devoid of any people. In this unretouched photograph, you can see what appears to be a small girl with blonde locks wearing a white patterned dress on the gallery. Please note the orb appearances around the area in question. In this second photograph, you can see in this clipped and enlarged area a possible second figure to the left facing of the girl, who appears to be wearing a dark full-length gown and a skull cap. Trevor was apparently told to leave afterwards by Hampton Court staff, as photography is strictly banned. Trevor left but later sent a copy to Hampton Court. The staff confirmed that a child ghost of a young girl had been seen there, and even a security officer later confirmed that he too had seen her. Of course, the girl must be royal, although nobody can confirm who she is. But as intriguing is the second figure. Could this be the ghost of Cardinal Wolsey, who owned Hampton Court before falling from grace? One Hampton Court Palace staff member recalled an event in the Queen's Gallery after the building was closed to the public. A group of staff were preparing for an evening function at the palace. In the Queen's Gallery, the colleagues gathered together for a break when they heard the sound of a door opening. They dismissed this as nothing and continued to chat with each other. But then they heard an eerie set of footsteps, and there was something so oddly startling about it. The group all had the same reaction of screaming and running for their lives out of the gallery. After regathering, they returned to the room to check if anyone was present. There was no one. Here is one personal experience from a visitor on TripAdvisor from 2015.
My friend and I had our first ghost encounter. We walked into this room, only the kids and us. It was pretty empty, with a fireplace, mirror, dress and suit. As soon as my friend and I walked into the room, we both said, "Oh my God, I just got shivers." The room gave my friend the creeps and said, "Come on, let's go." I took a photo of the room and headed for the door. As we walked, grey mist floated past from the wall. Past the door to the wall, we froze and was like, "What the hell?" We hurried off, questioning what that was. When I was on the train home, I looked through the pictures and saw the same grey mist in the mirror in the same room. We are both now believers in ghosts.
There have been many similar accounts of the public seeing paranormal activity, with ghostly mist being high on the list of experiences. Without a doubt, the palace remains a goldmine of psychic activity, but at present any opportunity to investigate seems highly unlikely, and so we are left with the occasional photograph or anecdote. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this show and will speak again soon. Thank you for joining me. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this show, please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and of course hit the bell icon for any fresh updates.